Hey, well, on a road trip, an elderly couple had been traveling along, and they stopped at a roadside restaurant for lunch. And after finishing the meal, they went out, got back in the car, and headed on down the road, and had gone down the road about 20 miles. And then it occurred to the wife just something awful. She forgot her glasses. They're on the table. And so she told her husband, said, "Oh dear, we've got to stop and go back. I forgot my glasses." And then he was so upset and just turned into one of those real grouchy old geezers and just letting her know how upset he was about it. And then they had to drive another 15 miles before they found an exit to turn around and come back. And the whole way that down the road and all the way back, he just chided into her about why can't she remember things, and just would not let up for a moment. Finally, they drove into the parking lot of the restaurant, and the woman was relieved. Maybe we can end this and get on with it. And the woman got out, and her husband was still griping about it. And then he finally said, an old geezer kind of yelling, "Well, while you're in there, you might as well get my hat and credit card, too." We love it when we think we're righteous, don't we? And just let other people know they're not as righteous as we. But Jesus has words to say about that. Hey, not so fast. Jesus has stern words about it. When we read these words, we hear them, right away we want to say, "Yeah, Jesus, you tell them, you give it to them." But let us have some courage to realize, yeah, give it to us. Give it to all of us. We all need to hear this and to hear the dangers about it. To work through a checklist and say, "Lord, if I'm guilty, send your Spirit to help me through this." But hear the word of the Lord. In the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, it's chapters 5, 6, and 7, and we're starting into chapter 6 this morning. And chapter 6 has got some tough words in here. It surely takes the courageous, the real, genuine Christian to proceed and to hear the word of the Lord. But listen to Jesus' teaching. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, like the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And may God add power to the reading of this word. Not that it lightens the impact upon us, but it has the full force of impact to convict us where we need to be convicted, and to rise up the courage to step forward and to find that more excellent way that Jesus calls upon us. Hear the word of the Lord. In the King James Version, it's much more direct. I like that firmness. Beware. Beware. We've heard that. We see those at Halloween time. Back up north, from the north, you go out to a pond during the month of February, March, and you might find a sign that says, "Beware thin ice." Or on the roads, "Beware slippery roads." Beware ice is giving us warnings. What does that word beware mean? If you don't pay attention to me, you're going to suffer for it. This is risky space coming up ahead. You better pay attention and take guard to what is happening. That's what Jesus is doing. Beware. Beware. Because if you fail on these points, there are consequences that we all have to pay, and we'll suffer for that failure. But beware. Beware when you think you can practice your righteousness in front of other people. You might think you're impressing somebody, but you're not impressing God. There was a tourist couple traveling through the Far East, and they came through a little village, and they found a man there sitting on the corner of a busy intersection, covered with dust and ashes, and just looked very somber. And they realized the man was truly repentant, truly praying for the community and bearing this terrible guilt, and how repentant he was. And they were moved by this. And they said, "Let's take a picture of this man. I want to see this picture of repentant human beings and what's happening here." And they came up to the holy man and they said, "Pardon us, is it okay if we take your picture?" And the holy man responded by saying, "Just a moment, please. Let me rearrange my ashes." got them back in his head in just the right point. There's a lot of rearranging of ashes going on in modern religion. Do you agree? We try to make it all look so good, but sometimes we're merely fixing up the piosity. Is that a word? How pious we try to make ourselves appear to look better for the photograph, better for the show. Jesus minces no words about it. It's hypocrisy. We're putting on the show. In the ancient Greek culture, the word for hypocrite was the word they had for actor. You'd go to the play and you'd see people with masks on and they'd say their lines full of melodrama, like a soap opera. And you would say, oh, there's that hypocrite. I read about that hypocrite. He's a great hypocrite. He's a great actor putting on the show. It looks so good. It really tugs at my heart. And Jesus says, those kind of hypocrites, those kind of actors, sometimes they get into religious settings. And Jesus says, they're not fooling God, let me tell you. That was that way often throughout the Old Testament, throughout the whole Bible. God is always so concerned about the play actors that go on within his synagogues, within his temple, within his holy realm. In the book of Amos, he proclaims through the prophet very harsh words. God speaking to the people, they have so drifted away from him, putting on the pretenses, but the heart is so gone. God says, I despise your feast days. God says, I just can't stand it when it comes around to the holidays, watching you people put on your show. God says, I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Though you offer me burnt offerings, your meal offerings, I'm not going to accept them. It's almost though God has his arms folded, said, forget about it. It doesn't mean anything to me. And what is God's purpose in all of this? Because you don't really mean it. You're just putting on a show. You're trying to make it look so good. You're like J.D. whacking his $5 check at the offering time. And God says, I'm not falling for it. It's all a lot of hypocrisy. Isaiah said the very same words. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They talk a great show, but it's not in here. They worship me in vain. It's just for the showtime they have there. But their teachings are merely human rules. They forgot to seek me out. Oh, the Jews had a history of that. They did it so well. When it came time for mourning, they had great displays. They would take their robes and tear them. And they would yell and moan and groan and whine in the streets. How awful this is that has come to us. Throwing dust upon themselves and ashes upon themselves. In some points of Israel history, it was a very authentic display of repentance. But often it became just a show. One of the ancient historians noted that sometimes the Jews would be careful to tear their robe next to the hem so that later that night they could sew it back together again and wear it the next day. Just for the show. Just to make it look good and make it look so awful what has become to them. But what God is seeking is an authentic heart, not the display. He's not looking for the show. He's not looking for people to try to put on a display to impress other people. God is saying, why don't you impress me? I'm the one you should be thinking about. Doing good things for other people. Giving alms, giving gifts. Isn't this a good thing? Here, all this peanut butter. I appreciate that. I've talked to many of you. You say when you bring in your macaroni, your peanut butter, or soup, cereal, whatever it may be that we collect, you have a very heartfelt concern about that. You're shocked like I am that there's people all around us are hungry. Some people not far from us at all, within just a few miles. They don't always make every meal on the table. They're coming up short often. And your heart compels you to get out to the store and bring in food, to do what we can to help people who are suffering. But can you imagine the person that brings in their peanut butter with a band and some lights and some shows and wind it up and here we go, bringing in my jar of peanut butter. Well, they're doing it for the show. They're not doing it with that heart concern. That's what truly captures God's heart. I remember talking to people that trying to fit this in when we first started bringing the food. It was truly a humbling exercise. And I remember one woman who was very concerned, and it was peanut butter we were collecting. And she took me aside after church and said, okay, let me get this straight. We're collecting peanut butter for the whole month, right? And I said, yeah, we got a whole month to do that. Okay, and peanut butter's running so much, her mind is thinking. And I'm thinking, well, how many jars are you going to get? What are you working on here? And said, I can do that. If I just kind of skimp on a meal here and there, it frees up a little bit of money. I can do that. By the end of the month, I'll have my peanut butter jar in here. And I thought, oh, God bless you. How do you think God feels about that kind of a heart? Working, trying to do whatever they can to love, to help other people. Sigmund Freud, we hear about him a lot. It's called for him the myth of altruism. It's part of his power principle system. He tried to say that nobody ever does anything without getting some kind of a kickback for it somehow. Freud would agree with the Pharisees. Yeah, make that show, make that display so that people are impressed with you. But to think that somebody would do an action without getting attention, without getting recognition, they would just simply bring it in secretly and lay it before the altar, that they would just secretly care for someone, send a card of encouragement, send a note of encouragement when nobody's even watching. Freud would say, oh, baloney, that doesn't happen. People never behave that way. But in fact, there are people in this world that do behave that way because they're not trying to please Sigmund Freud. They're not trying to please other people around them. There's only one person that they're trying to please, and that's God. I'm doing this for God's sake. Serena Williams, when she first started out in tennis, she's quite a star nowadays, but there at Wimbledon, it was her first tournament back in 2002. And she was there, had a very impressive show and a very impressive victory. But she was a newcomer. She was an American, and the British fans didn't like her. They booed like they normally do for opposing fans. They were cheering for their own team. And it seemed like it was merciless for young Serena to have to put up with all of that abuse. And the reporters talked to her afterwards. How did you handle that? Those fans didn't like you at all, and they were not nice. Said, I know, I heard all those boos, but I wasn't trying to please them. There was somebody else I was trying to please. See, my dad was up in the stands, and I knew he was sitting up there somewhere. I couldn't find him. It's a big place. But I knew that he would be rooting for me. Even though everybody around him would be against me, he'd be on my side. I just kept it in my mind. I'm trying to please him. He's the only one I'm trying to please. That's what our acts need to be motivated by. We're just trying to please God. I'm not trying to please other people. I don't want other people to see. It's a personal thing that I give for God's sake, that I give that God might be pleased in what I do. That's what makes the difference, that I have my priorities down. I know what's important, and I hold on to that. The other things can fall away. The other things can fade away. The other things can fall off the stage. But I've got my priorities. I know what's important. You all know about the happy face, the yellow face thing with the smiley face on it and da-da-da. I admit I have a low threshold for cute. I can't stand that too long, but there it is, and it's very popular. It was designed back in 1971 by a man named Harvey Ball. And he was a Massachusetts commercial artist. And there were several insurance companies that had merged together and looking for a good campaign slogan, something that would jettison what they were working on. And Harvey Ball came up with the happy face. They'll come together with these plans and they'll make everybody happy. They liked it. They gave him $45 for that happy face idea. And there we go. However, the happy face little logo caught on, and it started getting passed along to other people, and other people picked it up, and they started making bumper stickers. They started making buttons, sticker everywhere, signs with a little happy face on it. And guess what Harvey Ball forgot to do? He forgot to get the copyright. He was just doing it for this one campaign drive and never imagined it would become so popular and worldwide famous. If he would have made just 1 penny from every button, it'd be over $10,000 at just a low commission at that. Well, Harvey Ball passed away in April of 2001. An alert reporter picked that up and saw it in the obituary. He said, I remember that name. This is the guy that invented the happy face. And he also remembered the terrible story. Poor Harvey Ball missed out on a fortune just because he forgot to send a letter to get a copyright on it. And the reporter found the son. His name was Charles. He wanted to talk to Charles about his dad and passing away and other matters. And Charles was delighted Sure, please, I'd love to talk to you about my dad. The reporter came and talked and shared some of the points, and then the reporter had to ask, tell us, did it haunt your father for his life that he forgot to put a copyright on that little happy face thing? And Charles thought about that for a moment, and he said, not really. Dad never really talked about it. At his service, we're not even going to mention it. Dad never had the thought about the happy, smiley face in his life. That was something that came and it went. Because there was something else in his life that had a greater achievement that caught his attention. And that's what we're going to talk about at his service. You see, the greater thing that Harvey Ball had in his life, that he kept this up on the mantelpiece in his living room, was the Bronze Star that he received for heroism during the Battle of Okinawa. Where's our priorities? What do we really think is the most important thing that happens to us, the most important things that we do? When we have those priorities straight, that captures our heart and that drives us. Other things just fall to the wayside. Are we seeking to please people? Trying to get the recognition that people can bring to us? Or are we trying to please God? Our reward comes from God. What a truly blessed reward that shall be. It may not be this lifetime, but we have faith that someday we shall receive this, to receive recognition for eternity itself. What a wonderful blessing that our Lord has for his people. Let us keep our hearts, our eyes focused on the real prize, pleasing the heart of our Lord God.